science obviously is being like pushed. Um, yeah.
Hi Ezra Pizza. I didn't know they were still
Hello.
making Canadian Heritage Minutes. I thought that they weren't.
I
I
don't
didn't know
know.
that.
Wait, they still are? That's crazy.
I haven't seen a new one in a hot minute, but
I
I'm
thought it
also
was
I haven't had cable since I was like
I thought they
12.
ended
I don't
in the
even yeah.
90s.
US government PSAs, don't do drugs, kids. Canadian government PSAs. Let's give a bunch of people puppets, a blotter sheet of LSD, and a camera. So fucking deep. Don't you put it in your mouth. Uh-oh. Till you ask someone you love if it's
Okay,
okay to eat.
Lab Potato,
All the
I
muffins
realize
of
PubMed
meat.
is a database and they're not a publisher. I am using an example. I apologize
Yeah.
for the misstep. I am, in fact, I know that you're new here, but hi, I'm Layla Shode. I have a PhD in experimental psychology and chronic pain. Neuralicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, same. PhD in neuroscience, specialization in behavioral neuroscience, master's in experimental psychology, undergrad honors degree in experimental psychology. Yeah, so I mean, the points that we're trying to make are, I guess, not to be nickel and dimed in such a fashion.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
know what I mean? Like it's more about the ideas here. Um, Kind of off topic, but also people need to stop expecting
description says
answers to.
PhD student. Oh, I haven't updated that. Yeah, so we've just come back actually from a 2-year hiatus. Back in 2023, we were getting our degrees, and now in 2025,
We're both
we're both in
doctors.
postdoctoral positions. So yes, I do actually
Yeah,
need to update. Is it Neuralicia
my
or Vulgar Sciences as PhD
I
student?
think
That's
mine's
actually
probably needs to be updated. Too busy out here doctoring to be updating no fucking biography.
I'm screaming.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean it's important to be accurate and it's important to words matter. I would say, and we welcome small corrections and stuff like that. But I mean, I think my notion is that if it's not detracting from the point or misinformation,
Yeah.
then you know it's distracting,
Mhm.
right?
Sorry, better off Ted. I remember when I was a kid in early 2000s, I believe it was SARS virus in China was going on at the time. And I had heard something to the effect they're forcing their citizens to wear a mask and they're arresting people who don't. And I was like, oh, but we're free in America to do whatever we want. They can't force us to do anything.
I was supposed to go to Japan in middle school and got canceled because of SARS. I've never been to Japan.
Well, I
Out
think
of
it's
like
time
with my
you
weed
go,
lifestyle.
mademoiselle.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, if I had the money, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember to update the old bio. Dr. Neuralicia needs the update. That sounds right. That sounds right. Me behind on my admin? No, never, 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 never. Yeah, I'll do that afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, kind of off topic, but also people need to stop expecting answers to questions asking why instead of how from science. Asking why instead of how.
I think the problem with people trusting science is that PhD holders tend to show these degree things as an authority instead of explaining the actual science. The talk always starts with I'm a PhD or researcher, which simply sounds a lot of row people. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked about this in our last stream using jargon, acting superior, and those sorts of things
Well,
don't come off very
you
well.
said in the last stream that jargony things make people think you're smarter and more likely to listen to it.
Well, so they're
Believe
more
it.
likely to say that thing. I can't. I need my notes from last time. Hold on, give
Yeah,
me
yeah, yeah, go pull
2
that up.
seconds to
But no,
pull that
absolutely.
up.
So this is absolutely why Alicia and I wanted to do this. We do this. We do science communication. This is what we're here to do is vulgar science, and I think that like meeting people where they're at when you're trying to explain scientific phenomena to them is so important. And it's also extremely difficult because when you get a degree such as a PhD, I it took me 7 years to do my PhD, but I was immersed in scientific critical thinking, and you
Mm-hmm.
learn scientific literacy at such a level that many people will never actually learn. So you have to try to communicate that again to people where they're at, and that again is like
Mhm.
what we're trying to do here, obviously. And so we're here talking about health misinformation, how obviously that's extremely pervasive right now, wellness grifting sort of piggybacking on scientific misinformation. Do you have what you need, Alicia?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
essentially, it's to do with their looking at processing fluency and how motivated to resist an idea people are based on the amount of jargon that's used in the thing. And what the dichotomy and the kind of surprising result was, they tended to endorse a statement as more authoritative and more likely to be true if it had jargon words that they couldn't then in subsequent studies define accurately, thus showing that they didn't fully understand that word even if they got the context of it. So they give more authoritative weight and truth and belief to that statement, despite having lower actual comprehension of that statement. But they say that they like the simpler statements better, which makes it, like we said last time, being between a rock and a hard place as a science communicator. Because on the one hand, you want to communicate and meet people, like you said, meet them where they're at. And we've frequently espoused in this space that our audience is very intelligent. Most people are very intelligent, and talking down to them is in no way effective for anybody. But if you want to be believed, there's a bit of posturing that happens with a certain type of audience, and not the entire audience, but certain audience members. When we're giving talks and stuff like that, people will raise their hand and be like, "Well, what about ketones?" And I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm talking about cocaine addiction in a rat model. What about ketones?" Like, and it comes across more as trying to undermine than it does to trying to add to a conversation. And I think that that's partially where the disconnect comes, is if you want to be respected in your domain as a person that's a conduit of the information that we're trying to give and contextualize for someone that doesn't have access to the way of doing that or the actual material itself, then you run into problems, I
Yeah,
guess,
I
is
mean,
essentially the thing.
like scientific literacy is an issue. Lab Potato has a counterpoint. Well, the point is that if you show a bar graph with a bar higher and another one lower, people can make that decision fairly easily. Sure, okay. But the problem is always that instead of presenting that directly to people, a lot of scientists assume people don't understand anything like that and thus need to have a translator for that information. You can say there's a lot of overcomplication of data just trying to make a simple point. I
I fundamentally
really
disagree with that.
disagree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I,
You can make a bar graph look real impressive by fucking with the axes. And a lot of people do that. And a lot of ad campaigns do that. And a lot of people that want to leverage science to make their point in a manipulative fashion will do that. And they will trust the heuristic of people to know big bar higher than lower bar, simple, me smart, and understand science, and they will capitalize on that tendency
yeah.
to a negative degree. And it's not about telling anybody that they are not capable of doing this. It's saying, hey, you are capable, in inviting people in to the
Hmm.
conversation and saying, hey, here's how these data can be manipulated. Here's how this can be misrepresented. This bar might be higher than this bar, but it might be because this study is overpowered to detect
Yeah.
small and non-meaningful differences.
And again, this is also the thing is, and so like, sorry, I just cracked the mic. Lab Potato, you also mentioned like the vaccine campaign, death rate, risk factor, and they have all of these complicated statistics, but it's like, oh, often some of that is for like like it's epidemiologists for by epidemiologists for epidemiologists, right? Like this is data that they're trying to suss out to better predict the spread of COVID. And yes, you can look at but you can also oversimplify data, and like this is you're kind of like maybe I'm like harping on this too much, but you like kind of being like, oh, PhD holders just show their PhD. Well, it's because part of our training is identifying some of the things that Alicia has brought up. Like, we are inherently trained how to, like look at like the very specific aspects of statistics, effect size, power. Are they overpowered? And yeah, science is empirical. I
Everything.
talked about this evidence-based medicine pyramid of like, meta-analyses and systematic reviews, which are analyses of like previous analyses, like it's like a study of studies,
Hmm.
are the tip of this. But
Yeah.
like, you're still able to like spin. Science still has spin, right? You want to talk
Yeah.
about, okay, there's a bar graph, but then we can talk about, okay, well, the variability in these models. And also, this is just kind of thing, people don't really use bar graphs anymore because people want to show individual data points because it's super relevant. That effect might be driven by an outlier, and therefore science has started
Yeah.
to move towards having individual data points so that
Yeah.
we can look at spread, we can better understand what we're looking at, as
Yeah.
opposed to A and B are significantly different in a basic t-test because their means are different, and that's it. We're just looking at the averages. There's so much
Right.
more there. And again, people who have a PhD, a science PhD, are trained to look and understand those things. Look at it and
Also, if
understand.
you bring up a population dynamic model with a million error bars, I believe an audience could be very readily and easily made to understand what that represents, right? Like in the one
Through
hand here, we're
effective
saying,
science
we
communication.
need to, a
Yep.
lot of sciences assume that people don't understand things like that, and then, saying like, okay, we could just show them a simple graph. No, let's show them the difficult one and explain how it's not actually that difficult, and you don't need a PhD to be able to understand it. We can be a liaison between people that weren't objectively deliberately trained for this, and say, hey, this isn't out of the realm of your comprehension. We're not trying to exclude you by giving you complexity. We are trusting you to be able to see nuance and complexity. Let me tell you what these error bars mean. This looks complicated. And I mean, to some degree, being able to represent data accurately and truly and simply is an art that, as Layla and I were discussing in our private lives the other day, very difficult, and most scientists don't know how to do.
It's fair, yeah. That is, I
Yeah.
think, like scientific success is often not gauged by your ability to present information in a accessible way. So like
Yeah.
100%, it's not something like, I don't know how many conferences I've been to where I'm like, this is like a terrible fucking presentation, and like this is their life's work, and they're doing like the worst presentation possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I'm just like reading. Okay, I think you guys are confusing false information and bad statistics versus simplified data for informative public information. Okay,
I don't know if
and
you were here for the whole stream, but we were talking about simplifying public information at the
yes,
top of the
yeah,
stream. And congratulations on the PhD in physiology, and congrats on the pubs, man.
a PhD important when you think you're trying to spread good information. I don't think a PhD is important, but I think credentials lend themselves to better
Legitimacy.
understanding and better, maybe possibly better communicating that information. We did just obviously add a disclaimer to that though.
Yeah.
Bar graph with data points is standard like 10 years ago. Like, you guys are really missing the whole subject about PhDs is elite.
Well, our subject today is talking about health and wellness, misinformation. So that's our topic today. We can talk about how PhD elitism
Yeah.
exists, and it's a pretty
Lavitato.
fine balance.
Yeah, Lavitato, I wish you had been here, I don't know, 2 years ago, because we have talked about, the pitfalls of academia. And I know we've briefly talked about academic elitism. I know that that's one of my flaws. I can definitely like subscribe to academic elitism a lot of the time. However, I think that like having a PhD and having an MD and having training, well, I guess MDs don't
Mm-hmm.
explicitly have training, and they can as like an external thing, but having a PhD and getting training in the ability to conduct good science, to understand good science, to convey good science is important and helpful, and I don't think that like I don't think
Yeah,
anybody's
also
yeah.
being